Where's this meeting at?
Okay.
We adjourned.
All right, we are ready. Okay, call this meeting of the Pittsburg City Commission to order. Will you please rise with me for the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You may be seated. All right, we'll open with public input. So if there is anyone here with anything on any topic they would like to share with the commission, now would be a good time to do so. All right, seeing none, we will close public input and move into the consent agenda. Are there any items from the consent agenda to be removed? If there are none, I will look for a motion for approval.
So move.
I second it.
It's been moved and seconded. Roll call vote.
Chenoweth? Aye. Johnson?
Aye.
McNay? Aye. Munsell?
Aye.
O'Brien?
Aye.
Right. Special presentation, Economic Development Quarterly Report. Director of Economic Development, Blake Benson, and Pittsburg State University Chief Strategy Officer, Sean Nacarado, will present the quarterly Economic Development Report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sean is unavailable to join us tonight, so I'm flying solo. But would like to bring you up to speed. First of all, to let you know that we've responded to 5 proposals so far this year. We've actually met with 4 out-of-town prospects so far this year. Other activities on the left side of the page are primarily PSU activities. On the right side, with retention and expansion, obviously Kindle Packaging, our biggest project of the last couple of years, that's finally completed. That was $10 million, 20 new jobs. Apex is nearing completion of their new facility. That's another $1 million with another 7 or 8, another 7 or 8 new jobs. Also wanted to make sure that the general public knew about an economic gardening lunch meeting to be held next Monday. I believe Commissioner Chenoweth is going to join us. That's a program for second stage businesses. The city has an agreement with the state that any Pittsburgh businesses that want to go through that can go through free of charge. So that is free. That'll be held at City Hall, and that'll be at noon on Monday, April 30th. Also, will mention that we are making progress on the child care discussion. Commissioner McNay. Monica Mernan is on the task force, but as is Commissioner McNay. The chamber sent out a survey to about 500 businesses. We got about 100 surveys back. 84% of them cited the child care capacity issue is a major issue. They said it's causing absenteeism issues, and the majority would support public-private partnerships. So we're going to be looking into some different possibilities and look forward to bringing you a recommendation in the next couple of weeks, because it's something that we're engaging the EDAC as well. So I know that's something that we talked about during the Imagine Pittsburgh 2030 campaign, but just wanted to bring you up to speed to let you know that we're still moving forward on those. So I know you hear from us a lot, you get our weekly reports, but at the same time, we did have this scheduled, so we wanted to go ahead and go through with the update as scheduled. But I'd like to open up the opportunity to answer any questions, anything you may hear from the community that you'd like more information regarding.
Blake, do we have any update on Block 21?
Like 22?
Block 22?
Yeah.
I'm just a point.
No, you're fine. Yeah, I'll one up you at 22. As far as I understand, everything is still on board, particularly with the recent request that came before the City Commission related to the Kroll space. But to my knowledge, everything with Block 22 is moving forward. Again, I don't want to guess onto anything with Block 22, but it's my understanding that the students will move in August. That's really the first priority, and then the businesses will likely move in September or October.
Do we have any businesses signed?
I'm not privy to that information. I know that negotiations have been ongoing for quite some time, but I don't know if Pittsburgh State actually has the signed contracts or not.
All right.
Okay.
Cool. Thank you, Blake.
Yeah, you bet.
Appreciate it.
I'm not going anywhere.
That's right. You're up again.
Yeah.
All right. Community Development Block Grant, or CDBG funds. Consider staff recommendation to return $378,536.56 in unused Community Development Block Grant, CDBG funds, to the state of Kansas.
Thank you again, Mr. Mayor. The city has had these funds for 30 years or so. There you go. So for more than 30 years. And as Commissioner McNay knows, sometimes with federal grants, they're more trouble than they're worth. And because of all the stipulations that HUD has put on these funds, they rarely go used. Businesses just, it's not worth not only the original agreements, but also the complying regulations that go along with it. It's been so long since they've been used, the state has asked communities like Pittsburgh that are not using the funds to give those back to the state that may be able to go to another small community that doesn't have a revolving loan fund like Pittsburgh does. And I think one of the best things about Pittsburgh is the fact that we have our own fund and the fact that you as commissioners can set the parameters and can set the reporting requirements instead of those being dictated by the federal government. It just seems to be clunky and cumbersome. And I think it's one of the major reasons that businesses have not taken advantage of this in the past. So our recommendation after sitting down and looking at the request from the state would be to give those funds back since they're not being used. And they're not currently in our economic development revolving loan funds.
So it says that we would be giving back $378,000 roughly and some change.
Correct.
How much were the funds originally worth? Like how much did we get total and how much does this represent?
I think it's close to that amount.
I believe it was 300,000 or something like that. They've been revolved several times in the last 30 years where loans were made, they were paid back, loaned out again. But as Blake stated, we're so much more flexible with our RLF money. These funds are restrictive. I think the interest rates are higher. They've got to provide low to moderate income jobs, which makes no sense to me. They should, be tied to higher paying jobs. And things like that. We haven't utilized these funds probably for 8 years or so. It's just been sitting dormant. And the state came back and last year at some point, I think it was in the fall, and they asked us what we planned on doing with them, and we said nobody is taking these funds. We're just, they're just sitting in the city's books. So they made the request if we weren't going to use them to maybe return them to the state, and they could utilize them in the smaller communities, as Blake said.
And Jamie's right. The jobs that we are creating, and I think you want us to create, are the higher paying jobs. So with, I would say, all of the projects that we've been involved with over the last 4 or 5 years at least, this wasn't even an option because the jobs that were being created paid too high of a wage. Which
Really?
does seem counterintuitive to
That's
what we're
insane.
trying to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, they were offered the opportunity to utilize
Sure.
these funds, but they all turned it down.
Yeah.
Any other questions regarding the motion?
I move to approve.
My second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Blake, you're up again for a third time.
Still me, yeah.
On a streak here.
This will be a tag team though.
Final Jeopardy.
Dilapidated structure funding. Consider the recommendation of the Economic Development Advisory Committee, EDAC, to utilize funding from the Revolving Loan Fund, RLF, to stabilize or demolish the structures located at 113 West 5th Street and 716 North Broadway, after exhausting attempts to enforce the property owners to pay for such stabilization and/or demolition.
Yeah, thank you again, Mr. Mayor. The EDAC has long wanted to have the conversation about how to use economic development funds to address dilapidated buildings, because it really does have an economic development impact. As you can see in their recommendation, neglected and substandard properties discourage economic development, not only in terms of is there not a business in that location currently, but it's hard to sell the community to a new prospect or a new developer when we have buildings that are falling on top of each other. So the EDAC at its last meeting discussed two properties in particular, the ones you mentioned, Mr. Mayor, at 113 West 5th Street and 716 North Broadway. And the EDAC felt strongly and unanimously that it was an appropriate use of revolving loan fund funds to either stabilize those structures, and we know that oftentimes they've been neglected for so long that that's not possible, so if demolition is the answer. The EDAC felt like it was a good use of economic development funds to partner with private business owners to either stabilize those or demolish them, and to authorize the city manager to work with those parties, and if need be, to utilize economic development funds for the entire cost. But it would be certainly the EDAC's preference that there would be a cost sharing, maybe with someone who either currently owns the building or was looking to for a new use for the building. So I think one reason I put the recommendation in there is because they worded their intent so well that we wanted to make sure that you saw the exact motion and recommendation from the EDAC. And I know Becky's done a lot of work on this, Darren's done a lot of work, Henry certainly involved in the discussions about what is legal and what power and what authority the city has. So I guess with that I would just open up for questions, because I'm sure you have some.
Bill, what's the cost of demolition and stabilization for both properties?
We're still working on those estimates. I don't have a number for you. That's part of what the resolution calls for us to do, is go out and get estimates and then determine based on those estimates what's the best approach. It's not an easy process, and one estimate isn't going to get it done. So I don't have a good number, but it's not cheap. I mean, it's not going to be $15,000 or $20,000.
So should we table this until you get the estimates back, or?
This is just a motion for me to go out and actually do the work, and up to the amount of the estimates. I don't know what tabling will do.
Well, so we're not gonna vote on not knowing what the cost is gonna be then? You're just gonna go get estimates on it?
You're not going to vote on what we're going to do with the properties unless I get development agreements and bring them back to you to vote on what we're going to do with the properties. This just instructs me to go out and hopefully, with your blessing, use revolving loan funds within a reasonable amount based on the estimates to take action, but my recommendation will be based on that.
So, could you share with me what are exhausting attempts to enforce? What's the process that we've gone through that's gotten us to this point?
I believe, anybody want to? I believe in August we began the process. Basically, it's our building official will go through a process where when a structure's been identified, we'll get in contact with the property owner, have a hearing, go through, I don't know if it's a condemnation process or what it's called. It's a
Demolition.
an order to demolish. We went through that with the building over on 5th Street. The parties showed up. They participated in the process. The order was given. Nothing's been done. There's an appeal period. Nothing's been done. We have since started up on several occasions a discussion with them about where are we, what is your thinking, what are our possibilities, which have led us to where we are today without getting into a bunch of detail. On the other structure, which is off of Broadway, I believe we're right in the middle of that process. So we'll see where that one goes. But it's, what are we, 6, 7, 8 months into a formal process for trying to get what needs to happen, and in this case, it just led down a route where, in the end, just like any dilapidated structure anywhere in the city, there's only so much the city can do. And in the end, as you know, last year with 91 structures, we demolished them ourselves or either with the cooperation of the property owner. This is really no different. This is just on a much larger scale, and this is way more expensive. And but But yeah, there is a very public process involved, and we followed it to the T, but it still sometimes ends up with a situation like this, where you have people interested in buying property and developing downtown, and the only thing keeping this property from being demolished, if that's its future, and repurposed, is somebody actually coming up with the money to demolish it.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, I think this is a dangerous precedent we're setting here. I hear what you're saying, that it's no different than tearing down these dilapidated houses, but I feel like it is. I think the current owners are asking taxpayers to pay for the demolition of their building after they've reaped profits from it from all these years.
And
What-
not putting money into, sorry to interrupt,
Correct.
and not putting money back into it to keep it from falling in on itself.
You know, and
It's
then,
irresponsibility on the part of the owners,
I
quite
agree.
frankly.
And then what's to stop other property owners, other businesses from following suit? You say the city's been in conversation with the Yost family and their lawyers. And I use that word on purpose. Because I think they're asking taxpayers to pay their bill. And I think taxpayers ought to know who the hell is asking them for this money. And I think it's a bunch of hooey.
I'd just like to agree with you, Patrick and Jeremy. You know, we all own property, most of us, and it's our responsibility to maintain it. If we do this for a couple property owners that are irresponsible, will other property owners line up to want the same type of?
Before you go there, I think that we're throwing both of these property owners into the same bag. But I think the one on Broadway perhaps is a little different, because their issue materialized because of the Beitzinger fire that has exposed their wall. The property on Fifth Street did not come about because of that. It came about because of their own lack of investment.
Oh, gentlemen, how do we balance what you're saying with providing a safety? Because Fifth Street's blocked off.
Well, that's something else I have a question about. What legal recourse, if this building falls, do people have against the city? Or is it against the property owners? Because we have condemned it. I mean, that's a question to me. Is the building condemned?
The building has been ordered to be demolished.
Okay, so that's the same as condemned.
The building is demolished by the city, then the city does have a lien against that piece of real estate that can be closed upon.
What happens to these two interior walls that are going to be exposed now? Are they going to be like the piece of property on Broadway that we're looking to tear down because of those interior walls are now exposed?
I don't know if that's the reason why that property on Broadway has been ordered or going through the process in order to be demolished.
I was under the understanding that that was the reason.
I can speak to a little bit of that, and I don't know. Basically, yes, when the Beitzinger fire happened, the wall that was exposed was an interior wall, and as part of the protection against the elements, something would have needed to be done, which wasn't done. Was that the only reason that that building's in the state of disrepair that it's in? I can't tell you that.
Yeah.
But definitely, it has added to it. On the Fifth Street property, each one of these we're finding is different, which is, you're probably wondering how these two ended up in front of you, because obviously, as we know, these aren't the first two. There's numerous properties that are in disrepair at different states, and some of them have actually fallen into Elm Street a couple of years ago, and So we know that this is going to happen. This property was the original property. So the buildings on the side of it are tied into its walls, which is why we're having so much trouble. Usually, I mean, we're pretty good at building demo, so getting a building demo estimate isn't really rocket science in a lot of cases. But once you've been into this building, you realize that the two buildings next to it, which are active businesses, are tied into its walls. So you kind of have a lean-to effect, if you will. So demolishing this building is not something that's simple. It's probably one of the reasons that the people that own the building haven't wanted to take it on, because of the liability of it, or the trust that owns the property. But it's a significant challenge to find a way to, we've actually moved the tenants out. Now the street is completely taped off. And one of the reasons this is before you is because of the need to get the building open. Henry's right. We can demo it, and then we could always seek a judgment in court. This is going to take so much time.
You know,
it's-
you're saying that the reason that the Yost family didn't tear it down was because of the liability of the buildings abutting it. But we're gonna take that liability on.
First of all, I said that maybe, that I don't have anything in writing from the Yost. I'm assuming that's probably a big concern for anybody that wants to tackle that.
One thing, our new insurance providers, have we talked to them about our liability coverage if those two buildings have an issue?
Oh, we have that kind of coverage. I'm not sure that if we hired a contractor that they wouldn't be the one to have insurance on the demo.
Yeah.
But you have to want to hire the
I'll
contractor.
bet we'd both need it. You know, the way attorneys are, no offense.
Do you want to weigh in on the liability as it sits right now with just a building in town?
Yeah, I mean, right now, it's the landowner's responsibility if someone's in.
Right.
To the state of that building. I'm not saying that someone wouldn't try to make a claim against the city of Pittsburgh as well, but, and one of the reasons I think, and Darren, I don't want to speak for Darren, but I think that this has moved the way it has is because this would, I think, get the building down much quicker than the alternative.
You said this is in a trust? You s-
The
you said
building
that,
is held
yeah,
in
the
a
building
trust.
in a trust. Can we go back on this trust, or do we know what the trust is worth, or do we have any expectations of recouping anything from this?
You know, trusts are private, the trust documents themselves are private documents, and we don't have access to that. I don't know if this trust owns any other real estate, other
If
than
it
this
did,
particular building.
would we be able to go back on that then?
Potentially. I don't want to go into too much legal advice here in the open meeting. If we wanted to convene into an executive session under attorney-client privilege, I'd be a little more comfortable giving you some of this legal advice, if that's what we'd like to do.
I would like to see that happen. I think there's a lot of questions that maybe we need some answers before we take any action on this, so.
Is it a fair statement that the property on Fifth Street is an urgent situation that we need to deal with versus the property on Broadway from a safety standpoint?
From a safety standpoint, yeah, I don't know what's holding those buildings together. I feel like I'd be guessing if I told you.
But we're not.
I know one of them's been through this entire process, so as far as that goes, we're much further down the road to knowing what the likelihood.
The one on Fifth Street?
Yeah, the
Okay.
one on Broadway is still, in a process, a formal process of going through.
But if we chose to do nothing as, based on the recommendation and just pursue the property owner, that street would not reopen. You would not, we would
That-
not,
That
nothing
tape,
would-
that tape is not coming down
Okay.
until that building does. I mean,
Okay.
it'd be completely irresponsible of us to let anybody walk within a brick falling distance, which
So
is
that-
considerable.
That is a significant issue to me.
I also just wanted to clarify, it was not the EDAC's intent to reward property owners that have let their properties go into disrepair and the city come in and knock it down and then hand a shiny new lot back to the new owner. The idea was to incent new development and new investors that are looking at our community, and very similar to the risk that somebody like Larry Fields took on when he took on that building that hadn't been touched in 40 years and turned it into a beautiful new event center, similar to what the Posterics have done at Signet Coffee. As each of those developers approached us, they showed us their numbers and they said, we can do this project, but we can't handle that upfront cost. If you can help us with that upfront cost in addressing these buildings, we can make it cash flow and we can make it happen. It's the EDAC's goal to encourage that kind of project with these two properties. So I just wanted to make sure that that was clear on their intent.
And to follow up on that, you probably already know this, but the properties will become ours, not that having some former, you know, hey, we're looking for parking lots, but the idea would never be that we would leave it with the owner. We would get it in exchange, but you're talking about an $18,000 lot for a $100,000 to $200,000 demo, which is obviously not a good math problem in anybody's books.
Well, so Don, to respond to your question, which I think is pertinent, the speed versus this part of it, and I think my concern, it sounds like Patrick's as well, is like, I would love to see these buildings, especially the one on 5th Street, put into productive use, as I know that there are several people that have been looking at that. And I want to encourage that kind of thing and not hold up that process. But at the same time, I guess and it sounds like from what I'm hearing from the staff, is that in moving forward with this process, we would not eliminate the possibility of being able to pursue compensation of some kind from the current property owners, as kind of Patrick had brought up. I don't want to set the precedent of like, you can come into Pittsburgh and treat property however you want and make a bunch of money off of it and fleece the citizens of Pittsburgh and then turn around and fleece the city as well afterwards and get away with it.
But, you know, we don't really know what our liability is unless we approve this for them to get estimates. I mean, we don't have all the data.
Well, we're gonna get estimates. Here's the tricky part. Aaron is maybe like pulling out the hook.
Tricky part, formulating the sentence.
Agreements come with conditions, okay? So let's just say hypothetically, in order to get title to the building, it may be a condition, you know, where we give up the right to pursue legal action. Otherwise, I don't think we're making it clear today. The driving force here is this thing has stopped. There's no, the EDAC parroted exactly what every one of you said, which is what the staff has been saying for 7 months. This is demolition by neglect. This cannot continue. If we do one, if we help one, we're gonna set a precedent for the others. But nothing changes the fact that there is a building that takes up 2/3 of a block that is the middle of 2 current businesses that is now taped off, and it is unfair to the businesses that are there. And our job every day is to find our way through things like this. And we do a great job of it, I think. We have more people that have more experience and more patience and sympathy and empathy and experience. But sometimes you just get to a place where, quite frankly, if the EDAC has recommended this on our behalf because it needs to be done by the city, and the EDAC has a revolving loan fund, which what they're really asking me to do, is to go out and negotiate to try to recover some of those demolition costs, because this has to happen, or that street and that building is going to sit just like it is until it falls over on its own. And I would bet you 80 cents on the dollar that both of those buildings next to it are going to come when it goes down like that. This is not pretty. This is not something we're trying to slide through. And this is definitely, and I appreciate your comments because you're making them and I'm not. But something has to happen. We have an unbelievable market right now downtown, and I am currently talking to people, developers, 3 in fact, that are interested in sharing in some cost of the demo and taking the property and putting it into a use. And that was what I was referring to Commissioner Munsell with. Those development agreements will come before you. But this town's better than this. Being held hostage by whatever decisions were made in the last 20 or 30 or 40 years by any individual property owner, I'm going to come to you with a recommendation from the general fund balance, or luckily in this case, the EDAC. When we're in a situation, we've been through everything, that something has to be done. That's what cities do. People didn't like us getting involved in the BES. Sometimes you got to get involved in stuff like the BES. This is not a pretty situation. This is something we're trying every day to make sure that it doesn't continue. And we're getting to buildings before they're in this and telling people, hey, fix it. This is what we're seeing. But man, these buildings, they said this one building should have been down 30 years ago.
One
30
question.
years ago.
Is all the conversation through with the owners, basically, and their attorneys?
No, through as in
As in they're,
done, final?
as in they're not communicating, or what?
Oh, no. No. But, we go through 100 properties a year with owners that are like, I can't do anything with it. If you guys can push it down, you can have it. We had that conversation 90 times last year.
I have another question. If we use these loan funds to demo this, and we have somebody interested in putting a new building in that place, are they gonna, and this is just a question, what if they ask, now we need some money on top of what we use to tear that down to help us build our business? Do we give them more money on top of what it costs to get them in there, or?
Anybody that wants any RLF money goes to the EDAC, and they look at the entire thing up, down, sideways, and they make recommendations to you. I think I understand your question, but
I think the answer is possibly yes.
quite frankly, yeah,
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah, that's
could-
what
That's
I usually
the
ask
answer.
questions
Yeah.
that I probably know the answer to.
Yeah.
That's called a setup.
No, that's just,
And
common
as
sense.
Darren says, the EDAC looks at every project individually and the scope. So if there was $30,000 demo and they were gonna build a $10 million something and ask for something else, the EDAC would certainly consider that request and make a recommendation to you, but it obviously comes down to this commission.
Well, and it then becomes a revenue-producing entity
Yeah.
for the city, as opposed to now, it's potentially to suck revenue the other way.
And that's our job. That's why we're looking for permission today to move forward, because I have to start having advanced conversations with people about, look, this is the estimated cost of demolition. You're gonna have to, share in that cost. To what extent, that's different for everybody that we're talking to. And then what are they gonna do with it afterwards? That's different as well. But if we don't get past this point, I'm not gonna waste, 3 entities' times, 2 of them that aren't even from in town, and say, well, we're gonna wait for the really, really, really windy day that we didn't get, and hopefully that's gonna take care of it, because nobody's gonna wait around for that. These are private business owners that are trying to do something, so it's really tough.
And I guess I don't subscribe to the precedent argument. Each individual case is something that a commission decides on, and just because we decided, because of the circumstances in one, they don't necessarily translate to the circumstances of another. So I don't know that if we decide to go down this road, that means that anyone who thinks that they have, an opportunity to come before us would get approved, so.
There are so many factors in this that make it unique. That's a great statement. It's not cookie cutter by any means. It is just mind-bending how different each of these are.
It's still
Bad.
it's a history that follows you.
Well, more importantly, I think it's a practice we don't want to be part of. We want to be building a community, not spending tax dollars pushing it over. It's just tough. It's really tough.
I'll go back to something that you said earlier, Darren, and that is, we're trying to address these issues before they get to this point. And I think that's important for us to hear and everybody out in TV land also. If there's no other comments, I'll move to approve.
A second.
Been moved and seconded to approve. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you, Blake. Any non-agenda reports or requests?
Bill, oh. That's up to you.
I walked in about a minute late. And it has pertained to what we were just talking about a little bit too.
Yeah, that's fine.
I'm Brian Hanson, I'm owner of McCarthy's Pub. I was here about 6 or 8 months ago, I guess it's been quite a while. These talks about these buildings obviously are very important, but there's been buildings off of 3rd Street that have been in the same situation for years. And I've been coming for years with no resolution. And that person is in the demolition building that brings them down. He's in demolition that owns them. So you guys are now starting to put a precedent on buildings that you're having trouble to take down. We have a person in town here that owns these buildings and is in the demolition business and is not taking them down. So you guys are gonna start a revolving door here, like you guys are worried about. When I was here 6, 8 months ago, nothing's been done to those properties since. I've talked to the city multiple times. They cut the grass and cut some branches one time. But other than that, everything has been exactly the same from the day that I was here. So talking about dilapidated buildings, there's dilapidated properties too. And you guys are all interested in the downtown, obviously, but if you're a block and a half off to the east, it's not a discussion. So I want to see what you guys, new city council, feels about that.
You have a valid point. So,
I would consider anything that came before us of that nature.
I know you came earlier and talked to us, and I understand what you're going through. But I think you have a point. If we're gonna take one down, why can't we have other ones that's in that shape, taken care of also? So, I don't know, here we go, getting in deeper and deeper.
Darren, you had mentioned before, Patrick had pointed out sort of preventative measures that we're working on so that we don't end up at this point with all of the old buildings that we have in town. Could you talk a little bit about some of that?
Well, we have a very active building official, who's, somewhat popular in the community. He has a pretty good repertoire. We've got an unbelievable housing director. We just have people at the city now that are more in touch, I think, with the community. It doesn't mean that there's not, I can think of at least 2 buildings that Brian's thinking of, or talking about probably. I can think of 5 on Broadway. I mean, there's just always, this isn't an anomaly in Pittsburgh. This has been the practice of building maintenance. People get rid of their buildings when they burn down or when they fall over. I don't understand it. We've tried to address it as well as we can. Obviously, Brian's been in my office since my first 6 months in the door, talking about the same issues. But hopefully that's reflective that I don't have any respect for Brian or his business. But when you're talking about legal issues and property ownership, it's not clear cut. But we do everything we can to make sure that if there's a complaint about a building, I can think of 2 we did on Broadway last year where part of the things were falling off the front and we put tape around it, and the building owners took responsibility, tuck pointed it. The buildings have changed hands. I mean, there's a lot of successes, but getting people to take care of their properties, if you haven't noticed, and if you were at the county county meeting we had, every single city in the county last week, Chuck was there, acknowledged their number 1 problem is this. This is the state of Kansas. We can't just go, if you're sitting out at 4th and Broadway smoking a joint, you're gonna get arrested. But if you just destroy your property that you live in and let it fall in around you, I mean, I mean, it's the most frustrating thing that we have going on in this town right now. But it's not, we're not unique, and we have a great staff, and we try to do the best we can, but, you know, Brian is, I don't know, I mean, hopefully I never see Brian in here again, because he doesn't have any reason to come up, but nothing much has changed over on Third Street in 5 years, probably.
10 years.
Well, I've only
Since
been
the
here
last
6,
fire.
so I'm counting the 5, but it's, you know, we do as good as we can, and I you know,
So
it's.
in this particular case, our hands are tied. We've done everything we can.
In this case?
Yes, in Brian's case, in the individual that we're talking about's case.
Well, I think today proves to you our hands are never tied. It's what are we willing to do?
Okay.
I think the ball that's on the table based on where we are over there probably is the city spends 6 figures and tries to collect in court. And that's,
This,
You know,
Expensive
one
method
other
of-
thing about that property that
Is
you're
that fair?
talking about is the code, what do you call it, where they're at, the zoning. That zoning, which allows him to be there, was established a long time ago before we thought about cleaning up downtown. And as far as I'm concerned, that's one of the things that we ought to look at when we have our Saturday study session, is cleaning up some of that zoning.
Good point, Pat. One of them is IP2 and one of them is commercial. Now, the IP2, I know the difference is there, but the one that's commercial is the one that's just across the alleyway from me, back towards the west. And there's a bulldozer that's been there for 12 years that's never ran, you know, things of that nature. There's multiple wrecked vehicles in that lot that aren't supposed to be there because they're not tagged and, you know, all that kind of stuff. So it's just a dump yard as much as it is anything.
You know, if I think we need to pursue this, just like you said, Patrick, but eventually, if we do nothing, that property owner, like everyone else, is gonna die.
Right.
And then what do we do? Who takes care of it then? I mean.
We have an auction.
So, you know, I understand your frustration, especially 10 years of this and nothing's been done. And we have a couple properties now that, to me, is just like you got the issue you have, so.
Okay, well, I just wanted to thank you for taking time.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Brian. Any other non-agenda reports or requests? All right, if not, we are ready to move into executive session. So an executive session is necessary to discuss personnel matters of non-elected personnel pursuant to KSA 75-4319B1 to discuss the city manager's compensation. I will look for a motion to recess into executive session for 30 minutes.
So moved.
second.
Been moved and seconded. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Okay, so the commission is finished with executive session. No votes were taken, no decisions were made. And now I will take a motion to adjourn the
I'll
meeting.
make a motion to adjourn.
Been moved and seconded that we adjourn. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. We are adjourned.
That really is actually the log.
Okay, so the commission is finished with executive session. No votes were taken, no decisions were made. And now I will take a motion to adjourn the
I'll
meeting.
make a motion to adjourn.
Been moved and seconded that we adjourn. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. We are adjourned.
That really is actually the log.